Hello everyone, welcome to Married Gaming. My name's Jess and this is Vintage Story. Today we're going to go over a little bit of how to set up your world on a single player world, what the different world options are and how that might affect your gameplay. So spoiler alert, there is no gameplay in this video, but we will go over the different options you have so that you can customize your game to how you might like to play. If you'd like to stick along, thank you and welcome. And if not, I'll see you in the next one. So the first thing that you'll do is you'll have to go to the single player world option and click create new world. From here, you do have some options. Standard is the survival mode experience. Exploration won't have any combat, and it allows you to do additional building without worrying about so many of the resources and combat and things like that. The creative is obviously the creative. And then this one is less about the building and more about the survival. So it really, and you can see as you hover over them that the different game options do change. So you can choose one of these and then further customize. We're going to go with a standard world for this option. You can rename your world whatever you want, randomize your world name if you'd like. You can change the build height option, and you can add a world seed if you wanted to here. But we're just going to focus for this video on the different options that there are for when you create your world. So if you go to customize, you can see what I mean by this. You got a scroll bar, guys. Like, there's a lot of options. So we chose survival, but you can change that here. The climate distribution being realistic means the closer that you get to the north, it's going to be colder, or really, really far south, it's going to be colder. So it's equatorial layout. The world width and length are how far out you can go before you reach the end of the generation of the blocks. So you can change this to be incredibly small or incredibly large. It defaults to 1 million blocks. You could certainly do less if you wanted to. And world edge being blocked or traversable. This just means you can fall off the edge of the world. So whatever you prefer for this, you can choose your own option here. The polar equator distance is how far it's going to take you to get from like the cold north to the equator in like the very hot areas, and then again further going south back to the cold areas. So, you know, if you change the number of blocks distance it is, you change drastically the amount that you have to travel to be able to find those different temperate zones. Your starting climate is one that can make your game very easy or very hardcore. I recommend temperate because temperature does have an impact on food spoilage rates. The colder you go, the less likely you'll be able to grow food, while the hotter you go, the more likely your food is to spoil. So right in the middle is usually where we go at, but if you want to go hardcore and either have a very short growing season or a very hot area with high food spoilage rates, then more power to you. Seasons can be enabled or always spring. The game, when it originally came out, did not have seasons enabled, so this was a newer update, I think 112 or 113. We are, by the way, in the 114 version of the game, so all of these options are based off of the 114 options. The days per month, it defaults to 12, but you can go as high as 30 or down to 3. So each in-game day is a portion of an hour, but it's rather long. It's not as short as a Minecraft day, for instance. But I will say that no matter what you choose here, it has no impact on the amount of time that animals take to breed. So pigs, sheep, chickens, They all have a set amount of breeding days, how long that they remain pregnant for, and then how long it takes them before they can become pregnant again. And for those purposes, changing these days has no impact other than it may take you a full in-game year to breed animals. If you choose something as short as 3 days, it might actually take even longer than a year at that point, actually. But yeah, so you can choose to have the year go by faster if you'd like. You'll just go through seasons more quickly. Each season is 3 months, and I can't remember what the transition of the months. I think it is at the start of the month they transition the seasons, but I can't quite remember, and it might be different depending on the number of days that you choose. Snow melt and accumulation. This is just dictating if snow will pile up in your world for accumulation, and if it will melt when there are warmer temperatures. Harsh winters is your crops will not yield as much if they were growing late fall into winter, and they become ripe just before winter. You might have less of a harvest. Additionally, your animals will be more scarce. You won't be able to grow additional crops during the winter. And if you do find animals, when you kill them for their meat, they will have less meat. The body temperature resistance is defaulted to 0, but you can make it harder for yourself by making it so that you are resistant to temperatures at a higher amount, or easier on yourself if you make it so that your body is resistant to colder temperatures. The world can get very cold, and in this latest release for 1.14, they added the shivering ability. Your character will shiver, your screen will become frosted with ice around the edges, and eventually, if you are cold enough, you will begin to take damage. You can't even die from it, actually. The global temperature, this will impact all of your different terrain settings, and your hot will be hotter if you choose hot, and your cold will be colder if you choose cold. So keep that in mind with what I told you also about food spoilage, your body temperature, and crops. The precipitation rate. It used to be that you could only find bees, which will not only yield honey, but also wax, which is very useful for making candles, sealing your crocks of food to make them last longer. They used to be they only really would populate in more arid areas, semi-arid, even normal, really, just anything not, humid. But they have lessened that a bit because bees will be bees, and they don't actually always populate in arid areas in real life. The forestation and shrubs. If you want to be in a very densely forested world, you can absolutely change that. If you want to be in a treeless world, you can change that as well. Wood is a very important factor for starting the game and progressing through the game. So it is something to keep in mind when you're determining how much forest you want to see in your world. Also, wolves will spawn in forest areas, and that is determined by trees being there. So keep that in mind as well. Microblock chiseling is really cool. You can put multiple blocks together if you enable the function. There's 2 options once it's enabled, either stone, wood, and bricks, or most cubic blocks. Stone, wood, and bricks will limit you to those items being put together for multi-block chiseling, but most cubic bricks obviously will allow you to have more options in the different types of blocks that you do chisel together. For instance, if you wanted to do cobblestone and is it plaster? You wouldn't be able to with this necessarily because it's not stone, wood, or bricks. Death punishment is it's dropping your inventory or keeping your inventory. Death punishment being on means you drop your inventory when you die. If you're playing by yourself, it's not necessarily the largest deal, but if you like to explore a whole lot and you don't like the aggravation of having to travel all the way back to your death point, you might want to keep your inventory on. The grace timer is about monsters. It's not about wolves. It's not about hyenas. It's not about anything aggressive that occurs as you would see in a natural setting. This is specifically regarding the drifters of all levels, but not the ones that spawn during temporal storms. So if you want additional days before monsters begin to spawn, you can do that. But if you like the combat and you want to be fighting monsters on the first night without anything in your inventory, you certainly can enable monster spawn right away. The other thing I wanted to note that's not really said in your world options is that you always start in the spring. So you won't have to necessarily worry a terrible deal about temperature when you first spawn or growing, unless you choose to spawn in a much colder area or you make the general global temperature colder. The creature hostility. This has to deal with all creatures, actually, including monsters. For Never Hostile, we've actually played on Never Hostile before, and that's, drifters won't hit you even if you hit them. Rams aren't going to be aggressive towards you when they are in normal gameplay. And wolves are also not aggressive towards you. Passive, I'm not exactly sure which animals are passive for this. The wolves did still attack us when we chose this, and we didn't touch them, but maybe just getting close is considered aggravating enough to a passive creature that is normally hostile. And then there's aggressive, which is the normal option, and that means that drifters will attack you. Wolves, rams, if they're not generation 10, will attack you. So if you don't like combat, I recommend Never Hostile. It still allows you to see drifters. Sorry about that. My husband came home in the middle of my recording. We were talking about creature hostility. So aggressive creatures will obviously attack you. The Never Hostile ones will not, but they will still appear. So as I was saying, if you don't like things attacking you while you're trying to build, but you still want to be able to get temporal gears by killing a bunch of drifters, you can choose the Never Hostile option, and they will still generate in the evening hours and just not bother you unless you want to bother with them. Creature strength will also maybe give you a more hardcore or easier experience depending on what you want to choose. The normal is 100%, but they can go down to very weak or deadly. So if you want to have the creatures there, but you don't want to endanger yourself as much, you can go with very weak. Or if you're a crazy person and you just want to die all the time, then you can go with deadly. Your HP is also something that you can change, which will also impact the combat experience that you have. They default to 15. We usually go for 35. Either way, with the nutrition mechanics that are in the game, as you increase all of your different nutrition bars, which are fruit, grain, veggie, and protein, and now with 114 dairy, you will gain additional hit points above what this starting area is dictating. So that's what you will start with, but you can get additional hit points based on your nutrition. Your hunger rate. Ooh, this one's interesting. So there are lots of things in the game that give you a higher hunger rate. So that means needing to generate more food, because if you start to starve, you take damage. And after taking so much damage, you will die. So making it faster will compound with any of the items in the game or actions, even just like holding a torch in your offhand, wearing armor, you know, chopping down a tree or doing anything physical in the game increases your hunger. So if you choose a higher hunger rate, again, you're going hardcore mode here and you're going to need way more food. But if you like to cook, maybe that's something that you really want. And then similarly, if you just don't want to be bothered and you want to cook as minimally as possible and you just really want to build because it's a really pretty game, and I get that, then you could choose much slower. We have a walk speed as well. We usually go with fast because we just want to get where we're going as quick as we want to get there. If you like meandering through the forests or the plains of this beautiful world that can be created through this game, then maybe you want to go slightly slower or much slower. But you can dictate what the standard walking speed is for your character in here. And then there's block gravity. Standard is sand and gravel, and that's annoying enough as it is. But if you really want to go for, you know, realism, then you could also have soil slide as it becomes unstable. But that also means if there is a bunch of soil over a cave and you jump on that soil, you're gonna fall. So keep that in mind. It also means that if you want to try and build something up in the air, you're going to have to actually have scaffolding and blocks supporting it underneath. The food spoilage rate, it's standardly set to 25%. But, as you can see, you can go as high as 400%. Like I said, take this into consideration when also considering your temperatures, your global temperatures, and where you're going to be starting it in your starting climate, because that will all additionally impact your food spoilage rate, and this is a percentage tacked on top of that. If food already spoils quicker in a hot environment and you have a higher spoilage rate, it will spoil even faster. That's good if you want to get a lot of rot and get compost, which is a more fertile soil than most, but it is something to keep in mind. Your sapling growth speed. How fast will your saplings grow? That's all it is. You can go really slow or really fast. Standard's 8 days. You do generally need a lot of wood in the game, whether you like, you know, extravagant buildings or not. So we usually don't go anything higher than the 8 days, and we usually actually go shorter. We usually stay around 5. But that will drastically impact how fast your saplings grow. If you have a more forested world, maybe you want to make them take longer because you have plentiful trees to choose from. If you have a less forested world, maybe you want them to grow really fast so that when you do get a sapling by punching random bushes on the ground or leaves, then you can grow trees very quickly, as it will be more difficult. Tool durability, we go higher than 100% on this almost always, just because flint tools, which is usually what you're starting out with, or stone, which is even worse, they run through real fast. So you'll find yourself constantly making these tools even at a higher percentage. But if you wanted to go hardcore mode and make it a lower percentage, you can do that as well. Your pro pick. So a pro pick is a prospecting pick. And what this allows you to do is find different ores in an area. And it has 2 modes, one of them being node search radius. Now you can disable this mode, which is standard. And then the mode that is enabled on the pro pick is a mode where you have to mine up one piece of rock, move some blocks away from it, mine up another piece of rock, move some blocks away from that, and mine up a third, and then it's sort of like a triangulation of, you know, what materials are in that area, but it gives it to you in likelihoods. I believe it's percentages, but the node search is pretty cool, and we usually go for an 8-block radius, and that is a radius, so 8 blocks from where you started is the outer edge of what that previous node showed you. Surface copper deposit frequency. Standard is rare, I believe. And the thing about the surface copper deposits is that's really how you get started with any of the tools that you need to mine up stone. This isn't like those other blocky games where you can make a wooden pickaxe and get stone. You actually have to find surface deposits of metals in order to be able, or you have to pan for it, but surface deposits or panning to find nuggets of metals, excuse me, in order to be able to make your first pick and mine any stone or any additional ores. So changing this can change your experience. And again, if you choose never, you might rely solely on a pro pick, and maybe that's the kind of game you like. But that is also an option. Surface tin deposits. Tin is the metal that most easily will get you from to the next stage of mining. There are tiers of hardness for the different materials that you can mine up, and copper is the lowest, and then the next tier would take a composite metal or an alloyed metal, which the easiest one to do is tin bronze, which is tin and copper. So the surface deposit frequency of that is also something that you can control. The global deposit spawn rate, it affects all ores. So there are certain ores in the game, even at the standard 100%, that are very large ore veins. This includes quartz and iron, and I think olivine. So having a higher percentage on this will make those gigantic, and it will feel like those are the only things that you run into. We've done it before. But if that's something that you like, then almost every time you go mining, you'll find something. You can also make it harder and put the percentage down from 100. But this affects the global spawn rate of your ores. Temporal storms. This is a part of the game. It's sort of like zombies for Minecraft, but not. They do spawn at night, but temporal storms specifically are semi-random. Obviously, they have a pattern to them. Time periods where drifters will spawn. It could be day, it could be night, it doesn't matter. And they can have different weights. I say that because they're low, medium, and heavy temporal storms. But you can change the frequency with which they occur. The standard is 10 to 20 days, in-game that is. But you can make them occur more frequently or less frequently, or even turn them off. If you turn them off, that's fine. A lot of people actually can get seasick because temporal storms do make your screen all wibbly wobbly. If you have ever played Minecraft, it's sort of like a nausea effect that happens to the screen. So take that into consideration when you're choosing this option. But the different weights of the storms actually can change how wibbly wobbly your screen gets. It's more severe with a heavy temporal storm. To go along in that general vein, there's also temporal stability. This is a worldwide land effect. It's areas of land will be more or less temporally stable than others. When you do play the game, there is a gear in the center of the bottom of your screen that, generally speaking, should either always be going clockwise, but in areas of temporal instability, it will go counterclockwise. As you go lower in the earth, temporal stability decreases anyway. However, if you're on top of land and your wheel is spinning backwards, that's a bad sign. And if your gear empties, because the color in it will drain as it spins backwards, you basically go insane and you get pushed into what's called the rust world. And basically it's like you have a temporal storm centered on you because you went nuts. And drifters will spawn all around you, and if you have aggression on, they will try and kill you. And you do begin to take just, standard tick damage from being in the Rust world for too long if you stay there and don't do something to get your temporal stability back up. The rest of it is fairly standard coordinate overlay world map. Land claiming, if you wanted to play on a LAN with someone, you could enable land claiming so that, different people can't affect land claims and their stuff is safe. And then there's underground farming. Underground farming used to be something that the game allowed. It was never intended, however, by the game developers. So they will allow you to turn it back on, but in the 1.14 release, it's not standard as, a feature that they really want you to be playing. If you've never played Vintage Story before, I would recommend just starting in a Survivor world as a test, playing a couple of days in there maybe and seeing how it goes. That way you can, if you don't know whether you like the combat factor or not, you can absolutely test it out before deciding. So those are the different world options that you have for creating a world in Vintage Story. Thank you for coming along with me for this brief tutorial. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and hit that like button. If you really enjoy the video, please subscribe. And thanks so much. I'll catch you next time.